So I'll start by summarizing this question. It's related to AutoCAD architecture, and they want to standardize their space styles. The idea is that they would have a library of spaces on the network that everyone would have access to, and each space would already have predefined information about floor, wall, finishes, things like that. While AutoCAD architecture can certainly handle this, it's actually not that difficult to do. It's a little bit of a lengthy response, difficult to send a response via email, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to answer through a short video. But I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. I decided to break the process into 5 steps. The first is to create the styles DWG and place that drawing up on the network. All of the styles in AutoCAD architecture come from a drawing file. We can access styles from tool palettes or from the content browser, but everything has origins back to a DWG file. So if I go look at my content browser in the design tool catalog, under the spaces category, you can see there's a lot of different spaces, and there's medical spaces, for example. I can open the file that contains all of those medical spaces by going to File Open, Content, Styles, Imperial, and there's a drawing here called Spaces Medical Imperial. Now I find in AutoCAD architecture it's always easiest to start with something existing and modify it. So I'm going to take this drawing file and I'm going to save it to a network location. So if you want this to be available to everybody in the office, it needs to go on the network. I don't actually have a network, so I'm just going to put it to a local drive, but we're going to say this is out on my network, and it's just a drawing file. And I'll rename it to make it unique. So we'll call it Custom Spaces, and we'll remove the term Imperial from the end. Once I've saved it with a new name, put it on the network, I'm now ready to make modifications to the styles within this drawing file. To do that, I'll switch over to Model Space, where I see a nice graphical example of how each of these styles are going to look. All of this is modifiable. But the styles themselves are actually controlled using the Style Manager. So from the Manage ribbon, I'll go to Style Manager, Architectural Objects, Spaces, and then here I can see all of those medical spaces that are predefined within this drawing. If I go into the settings for any of these spaces, you'll see that I have certain levels of control. So I can change the name of the space, the description, materials, display properties, which is hatch patterns and color that are assigned to that space. So you have a lot of control over how it looks and the definition of it. Now, one of the other things associated with a space is data, and these are called property set definitions. Most of what's there by default are called automatic property sets. They come directly from the space itself, like the length and the width of the space. These property set definitions are also defined inside the Style Manager. If I move down to Documentation Objects and Property Set Definitions, you can think of these as mini databases that can be assigned to anything. And this takes us to step 2, which is associating the custom data to our custom space styles. I'll select the Space Styles Property Set Definition. I want this one because it's associated to style, not object. That's important if you want that value or data to be maintained for everything associated with that particular space type. Now I created a new value. I did it quickly, but I'll show you how I did it again in just a minute, for floor material associated with space styles. Now what happens is when I select one of my spaces, under extended data you can see there's a new property value called floor material that I just created. If I edit that space style, I can go in and change that floor material to something like carpet or tile or whatever it is that you're tracking. Press OK out, and in Properties under Extended Data I see that value. Now you can't change it under Extended Data because it's associated with the style. You have to actually edit the style to make that change. Again, that's because it's a style-based property. If you wanted to change it in Extended Data, you would create an object-based property set definition. So let's go through this one more time. To create the new property value, you go to your Style Manager. From there, Documentation Objects, Property Set Definitions. I'll grab Space Styles, again a mini database. I'm going to add a new manual property set. I'll give it a name. Don't do spaces because you might want to use these for blocks and tags later. And then you can specify properties there, default values, but I wouldn't bother with that. It's not important for this particular workflow. So now we see wall material in addition to floor material, and we can come in, edit the style, and add that additional information. So now you're seeing that each style has custom data associated with it specific to that style. And that takes us to step 3, which is taking our new spaces and putting them on a custom tool palette. Oh, and before you create the new palette, make sure you save the drawing file on the network with your changes, otherwise your tools won't work correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and save that file. Now I'll bring up my tool palettes and I'm ready to create a new palette. You can name it whatever you want. In the end, you're actually going to throw this palette away. It's just to set up the tools. Now I need to create some space tools. Again, I like to copy, so I'm going to grab from the other space palette one of the existing tools, and I'm just going to copy paste it to my palette. Now that I've done that, I can make modifications to it because it's my own tool. I'll right click on it and go to Properties, and I can rename it to whatever I want. So I'll make this a lobby space. And I can of course change the description, I can change the layer associated with it, but the most important thing here is the style location. You want to browse to your custom DWG file on the network. Then you'll get your custom list of styles for spaces, so I'll pick lobby. And then one of the things that was mentioned in the email is that they wanted to be able to create a boundary that wasn't necessarily rectangular. If you go into your create type, you can change it to polygon or polygonal boundary rather than a rectangular. Alright, so with that, we have our space created, and again, there's more settings here you can control, but you certainly don't have to set all of these things. But our space tool is created. We can go ahead and hit OK and see that now on our tool palette. Now for my next space tool on our palette, I'm just going to copy the one I made and paste it to the palette and then rename it and change the properties of it. Now I can rename it right here, or I can go into the properties and rename it. So I'll go ahead and right click on that and go to Properties. Again, I want to make sure I set that style location because I copied, it's already set, and I can just pick the right style from the library in that file. As far as the other settings go, it's easy name and description change because I already know that I want the polygon creation type and some of the other settings that we set for the first one. So now I have 2 space tools on a palette. We're ready to go ahead and test these out. To test them, I just need to create a new file. For scenario's sake, this new file could be on a local machine. Again, you've got your style drawing up on the network. Now when I grab one of my tools, it's going to have me create a polygonal shape, and you can adjust the grip points on those. I'm going to go ahead and create 2 of them, and you can see that the graphics are different based on the style settings in that drawing. But if I select one now and look at the properties of it and extended data, you can see that it already holds that floor material. The other one holds floor material and wall material because that's the predefined settings that we put in our network-based style drawing. So those are working great. So we can move on to step 4, which is Content Browser. We need to create a catalog on the network in our Content Browser to post these tools to, making them available to everyone. So I'll bring up my Content Browser, and in here you can see there's multiple catalogs of tools. I want to create a new catalog. Now when I do this, you can see that there's a new option and there's an existing. So after this is done, when other people want to add it, they're going to pick the existing option. We're going to call this new catalog Custom Tools Hospital, and I want to browse and save this to a network location, again making it available to the whole office. Now that it's been saved to the network, I'll hit OK, and there's my new catalog. We can go into the properties of it and add an HTML web page to it and a description. We can also change the image, so I'll just go ahead and grab one here to give it a unique look. Now we can go into our network-based catalog, and we're ready to add some tools to this catalog. We want the tools from the local palette to come up here to the network catalog. I prefer to bring them into a custom palette. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new custom palette called Spaces and Hospital. Now, This custom palette is the one that people will actually pull down to their local machine. Which takes us to our final step, which is creating that network palette that others will have access to. And this is probably the easiest step because it's really just drag and drop. What I'm going to do is just reorient my views so that I can see my content browser and my AutoCAD architecture session at the same time. That way the drag and drop will work. So now that I've done that, I'll just grab my tools from the local tool palette I created and drag them up to the tool palette in the content browser. And then I'll readjust my windows here so we have a full screen version of AutoCAD architecture again. And then back up. So now I have this new palette. I'm going to go back to AutoCAD architecture and just delete the one we used to create the tools because we don't need it. Nobody else has access to it. And then I'll go back to my content browser and I can drag and drop that entire new palette to my system. I get the exact same tools. These are now linked to the network, so if your network administrator, your CAD admin makes changes, all you have to do is run a refresh and you're going to see all of those changes. And just to further prove it's all linked to the network file, if I go into the properties of these tools, they're grayed out. I can't change anything. That has to be changed from those tools up on the network palette. So let's go ahead and change, or let's test these new tools out. I'm going to start a new drawing file, drag and drop my lobby. I get a polygonal shape. And if I select on that and look at the extended data properties for it, there's the floor material that was defined initially. So there you have it. That's how we create custom spaces, that's how we put them on the network, and that's how we attach data, create a custom palette, all there in our video-based response. Thank you so much for watching.